and I'm going to admit everybody in.
Thank you. Hello, everybody. Welcome. Thanks for joining us. If folks are feeling up to it, you can either drop your name and city in the chat, or I feel comfortable even opening this up to see if folks feel comfortable unmuting themselves and just saying hello real quick.
Hello.
Hello.
Howdy.
Howdy. How fun. We don't often have the privilege to do a meeting format because we usually have more folks, but this is a really wonderful opportunity to have a more intimate setting and to actually be able to interact with people again. It's been so long since we've just been behind the screen, and I know we still are today, but just to hear your voice is really nice too. And if folks feel up to it, having your camera on is a really fun way to be able to connect as well. Hi, Veronica. Thanks for being here.
Yes, it definitely feels better to present when you can see people's faces reacting, gives us a tiny bit of that in-person feel back again.
It certainly does. We'll give folks a few more minutes just to trickle in.
Yeah, and anybody, tell us something that's inspired you lately. Help us feel inspired.
I did a ton of weeding today.
So it's inspiring because what will grow in its place, right?
Definitely. It was a habitat restoration project on Windsor Creek.
Where was that?
Windsor Creek, but over by Windsor Middle School.
Yeah, oh, how cool.
So it's our 5th year of that project, and it's looking great, and it's an awesome day weeding.
Oh, how cool. We'll have to touch base maybe after the fact. It's always so valuable to have more connections, specifically in Windsor, for that matter. We often work in Windsor, but it's always valuable to meet more people.
Cool, yeah.
If you don't feel comfortable saying it out loud, go ahead and pop it in the chat box.
Yeah, I'd love to know more about where folks are joining us from today.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yep.
I'm Joe in Petaluma. I can't see my myself, so I don't know if I'm on. So raise your hand, Liz, if you can hear me. Oh, okay, thanks. Okay, so yeah, I am like crazy mulching, and yeah, getting ready for like closing down some beds and condensing, so to save water. Yeah, and so that's what I'm doing today.
Nice.
Very inspiring, considering, the big D word is coming out later this year, I'm sure. So good for you for saving water in this dry year.
Yeah, thanks, Joe. Good to see you too.
I also installed those off-on switches on all my beds. So because now that I've put 3 inches of mulch on top, I don't know how to water. It's different. So I've turned everything off, and then I'll just watch it and maybe turn it on, I don't know, once a week, once every 10 days, not sure.
I just want to say that I want to thank everybody for making this environment healthy for the bees. So I'm part of the Sonoma Beekeepers Association, and we're collecting the swarms around and keeping our Queens Petaluma centric. So thank you to Daily Axe and everybody that's providing clover and things like that are important. But I know we got to not water everything, but anything you can do to give some nectar to the bees at this point of the year is really important. So, and if anybody has any swarms, I'll put my name on the chat, because I collect swarms and give them to the other members. So
Oh,
you
okay.
know, just to say that.
Yeah,
So
Sonoma County
I'm
Beekeepers
excited.
Association, as we all should be. You all are such an amazing resource and wealth of knowledge. So thank you for all the work that you're doing. I had the fortunate opportunity to attend a few events pre-COVID, and the community that you all have is totally inspiring. So thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Serena, I'm a little bit nervous to click anything on my computer and fear that it'll mess up my PowerPoint. What are folks submitting into the chat?
We have Hal from Oakland saying hello, and then we have Birkin from Petaluma, who's been weeding like crazy lately. We have anybody else who wants to unmute really quickly and just share one little thing that's been inspiring them. We invite that before we go ahead and get started.
Hi, this is John Shrimps. I'm a president of Petaluma Wetlands Alliance. I just jumped in this meeting. It just came from a pollinator webinar put on by the local garden club. But we're hoping to have a cleanup day coming up here, starting on Earth Day is what we're going to plan on. If it doesn't rain, we'll be out there cleaning up again.
Amazing. Thank you, John. We'll definitely include that in our follow-up email too, so people can plug in.
I was just going to mention, please send us all of those details. Same to you, Paul, with Sonoma County Beekeepers Association. We will be sending a thorough follow-up email for everybody who's in attendance and everybody who registered. So these collaborations and the events will be on everybody's radar. And I cannot emphasize enough how appreciative I am for every single person who's in this webinar this afternoon. And I think this might be the perfect opportunity just to segue and get right into it and get started. So welcome and thank you all. Let's see, as I expected, a little technical difficulty. Okay, here we go. So we all are here this afternoon to discuss how we can respect our rivers and a little bit about the Petaluma River dredging that occurred. So today's event is brought to you by Daily Act, City of Petaluma, and Friends of the Petaluma River. For those of us that are joining, since this is a meeting, it's a fun opportunity for us to troubleshoot and get familiar with how to host a meeting format. So if you're not talking, if you want to put yourself on mute, Serena, I'm sure you've got that as our IT person. Huge shout out to you. Thank you for your support. But to reiterate, today's program is brought to all of us through a really valuable collaboration and connection between Daily Acts, the City of Petaluma, and Friends of the Petaluma River. So I couldn't be more happy to have this partnership, and thank you to everybody who is here today, and huge thank you to Serena with Daily Acts for our tech support. That is an invaluable resource, and I just really appreciate your help. So thank you very much. So maybe by a show of hands, how many folks have actually heard of Daily Acts before, or possibly even participated in any of our events? All right. Nice, thanks, Joe. I see you there. Cool, that is very exciting. So for those of you who may be a little bit more unfamiliar with us or who have not been involved with us in recent times, Daily Acts is a small and mighty environmental education nonprofit based in Petaluma and working all throughout Sonoma County. We take a heart-centered approach to inspiring transformative actions that create connected, equitable, and climate-resilient communities. We believe in the power of our daily actions to reconnect people to self, community, and place, which ultimately is going to help heal our society and our planet. So our holistic approach starts in the soil and swells into culture and policy change. Through over 100 talks, tours, and trainings a year, we implement 3 interwoven strategies for systems change. First, we like to spread solutions and models that offer skills and tools and resources to grow food, medicine, habitat, and community, all while conserving resources. Next, we work to strengthen community leadership by connecting leaders who understand the interrelations of social, economic, and environmental justice issues through networks and alliances. And lastly, we are working really hard to build public and political will by mobilizing our community's power for environmental and climate justice policies. So as you can tell, we do a whole lot and our reach is far and wide. But if there's anything that I want you to leave with from our mission statement, it is the fact that we all have the power to be the change that we wish to see in the world. And our daily acts, again, have the power to change the world. So I cannot reiterate it enough. Thank you, thank you, thank you for being here today and helping to be the change. So a little bit of Zoom etiquette, since this is a meeting format, things might be a little bit different than the usual webinar that we all are used to, but folks seem to be really well versed on how to unmute and then mute yourself. So thank you so much. Again, while you are not talking, please make sure that you are on mute. If any questions arise during our presentation, please go ahead and drop that in the chat box. We will absolutely have plenty of time for Q&A throughout both presentations as well as at the end. So by putting that into the chat, we will be sure that we get your question addressed. And again, if any questions come up at any time, either use the chat or go ahead and raise your hand. If there is an opportunity to unmute yourself, we'll be sure to call that out to everybody. All right. Whew. Before we get started, a little bit of the agenda for the day. We're going to do a little bit of context setting to talk about what stormwater is, as well as the larger Petaluma watershed. We'll be discussing the human impacts on our river, best management practices, and then Stephanie from Friends of the Petaluma River is going to close us out with some solutions and why we should really care about protecting our waterways and these pollution prevention strategies that we will be presenting today. And then, of course, again, at the end, we will have more opportunities to have Q&A and to discuss different opportunities for rebates to support everybody in taking action. All right. Well, true in Daily Acts fashion, we love to start everything with a quote. And I'm going to sound like a parrot because I'm just echoing every single thing constantly, but change begins with each and every one of you. So thank you for being here. And Margaret Mead said it best, that we should never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it is the only thing that ever has. So I really, really want to hit home that we all have the power to be the change that we can be in the world, that we wish to see in the world, rather. And by being here today, we're going to learn very tangible actions that we can take right now in our own home and in our own landscapes. And I certainly hope that whatever you learned today and this presentation, that you share it with your community and your friends and family, because education is best shared. So please do that. And thank you for being here. And without any further ado, I'd love to introduce our two guest speakers. We have Stephanie, the Executive Director of Friends of the Petaluma River, and Nate, an Environmental Services Technician with the City of Petaluma. And I will go ahead and stop my screen share now and pass the microphone and the screen over to Stephanie to get us started on our presentation. Nate and Stephanie, thank you so incredibly much for being here today. I'm so appreciative of our collaboration, and I can't wait to hear what you all have to share.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here and great to see everybody's faces. I'm going to share my screen and jump into a PowerPoint, but feel free. I don't know if I'll be able to see everybody as well. So if you have questions, feel free to just unmute and stop me. I'm happy to clarify anything or answer any questions. All right. Let me just get this started. So first, I just wanted to start off telling you all a little bit about Friends of the Petaluma River. Like Daily Acts, we're a nonprofit Petaluma. We're a pretty tiny group, but also doing a lot here in the watershed. Our mission is to celebrate the Petaluma watershed through education and stewardship, because every great river needs a true friend. We really focus our work on a multitude of areas. We work in education. We have a watershed classroom program where we're going into the classroom and getting kids outside, learning about the watershed through hands-on work. We also run several camps. We have summer camps and after-school programs and nature immersion camps throughout the year, just to get kids outside, connecting to the watershed, connecting to local nature, and of course, getting out on the river. And then we manage Steamer Landing Park, which is an open space park in downtown Petaluma. It's near the corner of D and Copeland Street, and that's kind of the hub of all of our programming and events. We do a lot of stewardship activities out there, and usually during non-COVID times have a boating program where people can come out and get out on the water for free with us. So just exploring different ways to get people connected to the river. One of our overarching real like goals is just to do that through celebration. So we're really trying to connect people through joy and through you know, getting out and having fun and building community. And you know, we feel that people, once they love the river and have that connection, will want to protect it. So we're big advocates for the river and excited to have this opportunity today to chat with you all. So I wanted to just start with a little bit of context and just make sure that we're all on the same page about a few things like what a watershed is. And I was going to ask everybody to raise their hands, but I realize now I can't see well, so that won't help me. But very quickly, a watershed is any area of land where when it rains, all the water is going to gather to the same place. So here in the Petaluma watershed, that place is the Petaluma River. And I'm sure a lot of you know that it's not actually a river, it's a tidal slough. And so that means that it's actually you know, moving with the tide. So you'll notice that you look at the river at sometimes and you see a lot of mud, and it you know, doesn't looks really low, and that's at low tide. And then at other times, you know, we have a lot of water in the river. So it connects to San Pablo Bay. This picture here is an area called Cloudy Bend, and that is out in the Petaluma Marsh area. It's kind of like a Highway 116 over here. But this is an overview of the Petaluma watershed. So this kind of cuts off right here, but if this continued just a little bit, you would see it connected to San Pablo Bay. So the tidal reach of the river, so what's actually going to, you know, have brackish, salty water in it, actually goes all the way up to about the outlet malls in Petaluma. So on this picture here, right about here or so, where we have that tidal influence. And then in this area down here, so you can see all these little blue squiggles, those are all the creeks that are feeding into the river. Down here in this area where there's a lot of little squiggles, that's the marsh, where there's a lot of little sloughs where water's coming in and out. This big one over here is San Antonio Creek, and that's coming in with a lot of sub-watershed, a lot of little creeks feeding into that, and then feeds into the river. And then the area, let's see, I lost my, well, there we go. If you guys can see this, my pointer, this area, Eastern Petaluma, this is where it's really like the valley, what we refer to as like kind of a wet meadow area that fills in during rainy seasons. We see a lot of floods in that area. So these areas here in the blue are also where we're going to find all of our riparian corridors and some, you know, trees and shady areas for the river. So that is the picture of the Petaluma watershed. We want it to human impacted. And when I say humans, I'm really talking about, you know, Western settlers over the last 200 years, really. So we have modified the river quite a bit. As a lot of you probably know, the river Petaluma was founded because of the river. It served as transportation hub to get agricultural products to San Francisco. So it was really a hub of transport in the North Bay early on. So we have done a lot of channel modifications to make it easier for us to transport things, drained our wetlands for agricultural and other purposes, paved over that wet meadow that I was talking about earlier, and then unfortunately added quite a bit of pollution during all those processes. So I really feel it's important to kind of look at the big picture of like how did we get here? So we're going back a little bit, but I think this is all really interesting. There was a study done a few years ago by the San Francisco Estuary Institute and the Sonoma Resource Conservation District. It was the Petaluma Historical and Ecological Study, Historical Hydrology Study. And they really looked at how the system functioned before we came in and made all these changes. So this is really important to like how we've gotten to where we're at now. So this area up here on the upper left-hand side of your screen, you can see how the channel was modified over the years. So this one on the far left, you can see it's, looking like a river where it's going back and forth. And especially up here in the upper area, there's a lot of going back and forth. So you can imagine people who are hauling stuff on boats, they're spending a lot more time because they're going back and forth. So they, over many years, straightened out the river and took out a lot of those twists and turns. Up here is McNear Peninsula. You can see that was completely created to serve as a place for ships to come in and unload. So we've really altered that. You can see this is an overlay of the two different, how it looked in 1850 and how it looks now. So as a part of that as well, so the straightening happened, the wetlands in the marsh area were filled in. And then this picture over here is a picture of Eastern Petaluma. I think this is like kind of looking from Adobe Road back into town. So you can see at the top of the picture, the subdivisions in the Eastern Petaluma. But this is the area that was really that wet meadow. And so what was interesting is a lot of the creeks that were coming off of Sonoma Mountain weren't actually connecting to the Petaluma River. They were just getting to this wet meadow. And, in the spring and the winter, this would become a really marshy area. And so when we had all this development, those creeks were channelized through this area. So this picture is not a great picture, but a picture of one of the creeks going through Eastern Petaluma, kind of in the more agricultural rural area. And so these were really created, these channelized areas. So there's no like natural riparian habitat around there. There's a lot of erosion, and that's obviously all going to go downstream. Some fancy writing there. So the changes in the upper water, this just really illustrates, this is from the historical hydrology study. So this is kind of flipped, unfortunately, but over here on the right is 1850. So you can see all this green area. This was the wet meadow. These orange spots are actually all these like vernal pools. And so just really diverse area over here. And then this is 2015. So you can see, there's still actually some of these little vernal pool areas, but the wet meadow is largely gone. And you can see where, these little like straight areas of creek have been created to connect it to the river. So that really, just changed the hydrology of the upper river system. So here we are now. This is a picture from a few years ago before the river was dredged. And you can see it's calling attention that there's quite an island there. I think at 1.2, there was a group that camped out on the island, just trying to get attention to the fact that, this was really impairing our waterway. So all that, kind of just to bring into context what I was talking about. So when storms happen, they're coming down those channelized creeks where just heavy erosion is happening. It's bringing all that sediment into downtown. And then some sediments also coming up because we're a tidal river, is coming up from the bay. And there's in terms of our marshland, that has also been degraded. So the marshes really capture a lot of that soil and help build up the earth. So we've kind of on both ends have changed how that process works. So silt obviously is a huge issue for the river, and that's why dredging has been so important. Other common pollutants found in the river is trash. This other picture here, also not a super great picture, but I always try to take these. We do a lot of river cleanups, and we get those huge, like 20-yard bins, sometimes a couple of them, and just completely fill them up. And so try to get like a shot from the top to see everything, but it just looks like a mess. So we do those cleanups a few times a year. We do smaller ones and then a couple big cleanups each year. We take out about 10,000 pounds of trash. And during the recent dredging, a ton of trash was found in the mud that was taken out of the bottom. So it's just kind of depressing of how all this trash is getting in there. A lot of different sources, obviously. Not all people littering. There's a lot of dumping going on as well. But what we find, in the river bed is a lot of stuff that is single-use stuff. So it's something we all can do something about in our daily lives. And then this other piece, bacteria, it's also impaired for, and unfortunately this is fecal bacteria, mostly from, they can identify 4 different sources: human, pet, dog waste, and then cows and horses. So you can imagine the different sources of that. Septic systems leaking. Unfortunately, we have a lot of people who are camping out along the river as well and using it for different reasons. And then agricultural uses, those some of those creeks that I showed, that picture of the creek earlier, a lot of that erosion can happen too when grazing animals are going down into the creeks and grazing. If they're not fenced off, then they're creating erosion, but then they're also creating a lot of runoff that includes their bacteria. And then I'm going to stop there, and I'm going to let pass it back over to Liz. So any questions on any of that before we kind of switch over? All right.
Thank you so much, Stephanie. Really appreciate that.
Sharing. Yeah.
Yeah, if there are any questions right now, feel free to unmute yourself while we get started and prepare Nate's presentation.
I mean, just a comment. I think I was personally a little bit shocked to find out that there's more dog feces found in the river in that test than there was like agriculture. I think off the top of my head, I just assumed with all the agriculture happening along the river that would probably be the thing that was popping up more. So I found that pretty shocking.
Yeah, and that's really seasonal too. So, during the wet season is when they really found dog waste. So just pick up, bring the bag and pick up after your dog.
Hi, this is Keith. Could I ask a question?
Go for it, Keith.
Yes, while you were talking about all the junk that I've been helping a lot picking up stuff out of the river, so I can really picture all of that. But all these dredging spoils was just removed. My question is, did anybody do any chemical and biological analysis of those dredging spoils?
That's a good question. Maybe Nate knows. I don't know. I know there's probably going to be a lot of work continuing on that, but yeah, I'll let him jump in.
Yeah, I can briefly answer that. I don't believe any samples were sent off for analysis at specific laboratories, but our environmental services crew was responsible for environmental oversight of that process. So as the spoils were dredged from out of the river, we were monitoring various locations all around Shollenberger down there. Probably the biggest problem that we ran into was the DO levels, the dissolved oxygen levels in the creeks in the surrounding area started to drop. So to maintain, a healthy ecosystem there with the DO above 5, we needed to add aerators at different spots around the park just to create those oxygen levels that were sufficient for the local wildlife. But yeah, as far as analysis went to a laboratory, I don't believe any of that was conducted. So I guess I'll jump right in. Is that what we're, all right, very good. Sounds good. Well, my name's Nate. I'm with the City of Petaluma, obviously, Environmental Services. My office is over at Ellis Creek off of Lakeville. We have the big green roof on the way out of town here. So in non-COVID times, we are able to offer tours and whatnot. So if you haven't had the chance to get down here and check it out, it's definitely a pretty cool setup and quite a bit of infrastructure. So yeah, we can get started here, Serena, if you like. Like I said, I'm part of the environmental services group. Let's see.
The screen share is always a little delayed.
Delayed. Okay.
Yeah. So bear with us.
Yeah, no problem.
There we go.
There we go. So yeah, City of Petaluma, Public Works and Utilities, and then we have our environmental services group that I'm a part of here. There's 3 different subcategories as far as our environmental services teams go. The first one is our laboratory services that we have on site here at the Ellis Creek Water Recycling Facility. They conduct all of the wastewater treatment testing around the plants to ensure that we're in compliance with our permits. The next one is pre-treatment and pollution prevention. That's another group here that is involved in the stormwater program as well. The pre-treatment primarily is for industries, so the fats and oils and grease that these industries produce don't get into our our sewer systems that can cause sanitary overflows. So that definitely has an effect on stormwater health. And then we have stormwater conservation, which I've kind of leaned in towards a little bit more these days. And yeah, that's going to be our environmental services team. So here we have, examples of our laboratory services. When spills or non-stormwater discharges are identified, we have our staff go out and see if they can, identify a point source of the illicit discharge. If it's deemed necessary, we do collect samples to see if that can help us identify the contaminants. As Stephanie mentioned, fecal coliforms and E. coli are a pretty big presence in our river at the moment. So this is one of the tests that we do quite frequently. And that bottom right there is called a quantity tray. And so we use that to determine a most probable number for the amount of bacteria that could be in any given sample. And then the other fun part is if it glows in UV light, then it's positive for E. coli as well. So not just fecal coliform, but the actual E. coli bacteria as well. So these are some tools that we use to try to identify the contamination, and what maybe location, if we can identify a source, is usually pretty important. That way we can obviously stop it from occurring again. But some of the other things that we test for are total suspended solids and turbidity, just sort of the amount of sediment or the amount of material that's floating in suspension within a solution. And biochemical oxygen demand is another pretty important contaminant that we that we test for and we monitor. It's, how much of this contaminant is going to suck out the oxygen in the river, which can definitely affect, fish health and ecosystems in there. So that's something that we keep an eye on as well. But yes, so we're talking about pollution and stormwater. How does the pollution get? Most of the time, obviously, it's going to be through our municipal separate storm sewer system, or the MS4. These are obviously infrastructure that are all over the city. A lot of people tend to sort of get them confused with the sewer collection system. So we definitely want to make sure that that's something separate. Our MS4 has 0 treatment of anything that goes into it. So anything that enters the MS4 system is untreated and it goes directly into our waterways. And the City of Petaluma is required to maintain this MS4 infrastructure through our National Pollution Discharge Elimination System permit, which is known as the NPDES permit that we are on. So that's what dictates us to maintain, a healthy stormwater system. And again, it is independent of the sewer collection system, which is a point that I like to hammer home. Some people think that, when you pour it down your drain or flush your toilet, that's not going into the creeks and rivers. That's coming to us at the facility here to take care of. And on the next slide here, I have our recycling facility. This is the one I mentioned earlier. And like I said, this place is used to treat all domestic and industrial wastes from the City of Petaluma, residential and commercial, obviously. Does get moved through our treatment facility quite a few places, and eventually this water is discharged back into the Petaluma River, but it is under stringent protocols that we have it very much tested, dechlorinated, so we're only putting back good water back into the river when we're done with that. So yeah, we can move on there, Serena. And I think this was actually the same picture that Stephanie had, but yeah, it's a great picture, and I think it really illustrates, what we're looking at here. We have downtown Petaluma, the river going through. You can see all the streets here. All those streets all have the the MS4 storm collection systems on it. So everywhere you see, all that drains all the way right into the Petaluma River there. So it's really important that we, keep all these areas clean of spills, of, trash and stuff like that. Everything during a rain event is going to get washed right down into the river there. So, and eventually the bay. And yeah, that's why I thought that illustrated that nicely, that all that infrastructure, everything's flowing right down to that. So yeah, the City of Petaluma Public Works Department, we work to keep the Petaluma River clean through public outreach. We also have education, coordination with these local nonprofit partner organizations, implementation of regulatory programs related to stormwater discharges, monitoring trash and bacteria in the Petaluma River as well. Obviously, work with Daily Acts, Friends of the Petaluma River, and the Petaluma Wetlands Alliance. We also coordinate and implement regulatory stormwater programs. That includes outreach and education, like I mentioned, and best stormwater practices. So BMPs that are implemented throughout the city to try to do our best to keep anything bad out of the storm systems. We provide regular outreach for local construction sites around Petaluma just to make sure that they have their BMPs in place for sediment and erosion control. We respond to stormwater violations and citizen complaints throughout the city. So we hear that something's not right, and it'll usually be me to go out and inspect and see what I can do. And if it's deemed necessary, we'll make a violation and potentially, charge whoever's at fault for that violation. We also do, regular messaging to pass out to people, to keep people informed. We implement resident level through local newspapers, our website. We get our word out through social media, and we also do tabling events at farmers market to keep this on the forefront of everybody's mind. I'll go on to the next there, Serena. And we also work with the Our Water, Our World program. So they showcase outreach safe and river safe alternative pesticides and herbicide products. They work with these companies down below. We have Harmony Farm Supply, Freedman's, and Rex Ace Hardware. So this group will send out some of their employees to these various hardware stores and actually, teach the people who are working there about, safer alternatives to these harmful pesticides that, unfortunately do end up in our water supply in the Petaluma River. So they do good work by getting out there, providing alternatives, informing, the employees of these hardware stores, and eventually those employees will go out and, make recommendations to their customers, and hopefully we can keep the more harmful stuff out of their hands. Because like I said, those can end up getting into the Petaluma River. So when you are using pesticides, if you do find a need for them, we hope that you can make the best, healthy decision. And, make sure to, use them when you're done with them. Try not to store them somewhere where they might leak and get into the river, causing illicit discharges. And, make sure that they're washed out when you're done with them, and throw those cans away where they need to get. And one last thing to mention about pesticides, which I thought was interesting, was that in 2019, the city of Petaluma ceased any use of glyphosate, which is that harmful chemical found in Roundup. So that was a citywide event, and it's no longer in the city. So we've changed all of our personal pesticides as well. So again, we work with the Friends of the Petaluma River as well. Here you can see some river cleanups that we've helped out with in the past. They definitely do a great job. We like to support their student education programs and coordinate efforts for those river cleanups organized by the Friends of the Petaluma River. We work with them to help implement outreach and education for students and the public regarding stormwater discharges. And obviously we work with Daily Acts as well for stormwater friendly landscaping and promoting, the best stormwater BMPs to keep our river healthy. So So that's some VMPs for around the house, around the home, some residential stuff. I mean, car washing becomes a big one. The best way to deal with this is get it done at at a facility. All the drains on site at car washes, all that plumbing is mandated that it goes into our our sewer systems and not the storm drains. So all of that oil and dirt and stuff that's coming off your car at a car wash comes to our collection facility at Ellis Creek Water Recycling, and that gets handled appropriately. Otherwise, at home, we recommend that you try to use water, soap, and whatnot sparingly. Just know that whatever goes down the street is going into the storm drain and into the road as well. So you can dispose of that dirty, soapy water into your landscape, let it infiltrate into the ground. Also, dumping it down your sink, it comes straight to us, and it'll be handled appropriately at our facility here. Again, with the oil changes, was hoping that one would be pretty obvious. I think most people know that oil is pretty detrimental to the area. So if you are doing your oil changes at home, then make sure that is disposed of properly. Oil filters are disposed of properly. It's always good to have some sort of absorbent at your home. And even for more than just oil spills, I mean, we use kitty litter quite a bit for any spills and whatnot here. So what you can do with that, you put your kitty litter on, it absorbs whatever material you're trying not to get into the storm drain, bag it up, put it in a garbage bag, and you can send it in the garbage. So that's something that we do and recommend that you do as well. So it looks like I might have missed a picture there, got kind of in the way, but I'll leave just some words anyways, so apologies for that. But swimming pool and spa care is another pretty important thing. I know it's not for everyone. Thank you, Serena. But when it's time to, dispose of that water, the best way to do it is to land apply it. So it sinks into the groundwater. That way it can be filtered naturally. Always dechlorinate that water, whether or not it goes into the sewer system or on the land applied. See, like very, very last case scenario is it's possible that you might be able to discharge it into the storm system, but it must be dechlorinated, must be within the pH range that's acceptable by the municipalities. And it's not great though. We really don't like to do this very often. The amount of volume of water that you're putting into the system is just not what it's used to. It could cause potential erosion and other issues. So if it is really the last case scenario, definitely get in contact with your municipality and see if it's possible to get it into the storm system. But most of the time you should be able to do a sewer line to get rid of your spas and pools. Yeah, I would definitely make sure to ask for permission on that one though, because you can't overwhelm the sewer collection system as well. So something to be conscious of. But yeah, I mean, you can always give us a call too. We're always happy to work with people to make sure it's getting handled properly. So let's see here. You can head to the next one if you like, Serena.
A little bit of delay again.
Oh, no problem.
Slow and steady.
So yeah, big one for the pool. It's like I said, just quite a bit of volume that comes out of those pools. So overwhelming the storm systems isn't great and can cause definitely some erosion. And Steffi mentioned also the pet waste is definitely quite a big problem. More so than I believe too. Pet waste contributes to stormwater pollution that degrades water quality. Anything like left on lawns, beaches, trails, sidewalks and stuff. For a single rain event, all of that bacteria, parasites, viruses are all going to end up flowing into the storm system and eventually, again, the creeks, rivers, streams. I read a pretty surprising statistic that 1 gram of dog waste contains 23 million fecal coliform bacteria. I know that's kind of hard to realize what that means, even for me, but that's a big number. So I just thought I'd share. Yeah, so that's, make sure you're disposing of your pet waste properly. It's always a bummer to look around and see people who haven't picked up their dog poop and whatnot. So that's always a bummer. So just to touch on that, welcome to move on to the next one if you like, Serena. And then stuff you can do at home as well. Slow the flow is definitely the big one. If your landscape isn't conducive to sort of slowing it down, it's going to sheet water off your property. It's going to take the sticks with it. It's going to take the leaves with it. It's going to take, dirt with it, and all those pollutants, which are considered pollutants at that point. If they're being washed away illicitly into the storm system, are, going to do some damage out there. They're going to clog up grates. They're going to take things with it, such as garbage and whatnot. So, I mean, root systems are definitely one of the most excellent erosion control methods. Having, you know, nice healthy roots down below really holds that soils into place. Having the ground cover, you know, when it rains, it can soak up a little more of the water, keep things nice and down. I love, you know, the rock beds, the dry stream beds are always really beautiful, and they do a great job at, you know, stopping the water, collecting it in an area, and allowing for that infiltration to replenish groundwater supplies, which is an important thing as well. I mean, having that groundwater as a resource is definitely very important. So yeah, slow the flow is definitely the best thing you can do at home. Plant plants. I mean, we all love plants, so you know, get some more if you like. And then having drip systems that are good, so you don't have overspray and runoff. If your sprinkler systems are spraying too much, it can take that water down the road too. And that's also against our stormwater code, so it's something that you might get cited for as a violation. Just a few examples here of, you know, things getting clogged up, things getting backed up. It can happen pretty quickly, especially in those fall, you know, seasons. So, you know, proper maintenance of your landscaping area, making sure you're picking up those leaves, you know, not letting too much stuff go down the road, your grass clippings, stuff along those lines, definitely important. So it's something big that you can do at home. You know, we like seeing those clean grates, and yeah. Cool. And then as far as construction stuff goes, these are just some of the BMPs that the city, you know, makes sure is implemented at construction sites to help with erosion. Top left here, the orange guy, he's, you know, just a storm grate cover. You know, it has a filter sock on it. So not only if, you know, dirt is transported or moved there, it has a filter. So, you know, only the water will go down and it will hold, that soil's up top and still let the water pass through. And to be collected and disposed of properly later. The silt fences, kind of on the right there, those are really cool. They're usually on hillsides to help erosion control. You dig down about a foot or so those are under, and they're actually held into place by the soils. So if water's coming down the hill, taking dirt with it, it'll get backed up against this silt fence, but it's actually permeable, so it doesn't let the water go through, but it does stop the silt. So those are real good tools, especially on construction sites that have quite a slope to them. And then on the bottom, we have the straw wattles down here. That's a very common one as well. It does kind of that same sort of slow the water flow thing as, you know, we were preaching about earlier. It slows the water down, it dissipates the energy, it drops the sediments, and it just lets the water go on by. So, and then unfortunately it does happen, you know, when, you know, the BMPs aren't followed, or there's, you know, some problems with erosion, sediment control. This is going to be the sediment transport. And this is where the water picks up this dirt. It has the energy to, you know, hold, you know, your sediments in suspension, and it's going to go where it's going to go. There's not really much stopping it at that point unless you have the proper BMPs in place to really handle that issue. And, you know, this is considered a form of pollution that, you know, we definitely like to regulate. And definitely, you know, need to maintain a healthy system. You know, not only will this sort of clog up the storm systems, but eventually, you know, we all know where that sediment's going. That's going into the river. And when we talk about, you know, sediment transport and deposition environments with, you know, as Stephanie mentioned, Petaluma River being a slough, not quite a river, those energy levels aren't very high in the river. And, you know, as the tide comes in, the tide comes out, you know, it brings sediment with it. More sediment comes down from the city, sediment comes in from the bay. And eventually when you get those lower energy environments, you're going to create a depositional environment for all that sediment that just starts to settle out. And if we keep having that accumulation, then it, you know, it can gradually get bigger and bigger and bigger, and it sort of chokes out, you know, whatever wildlife might be in there as well. So it'll just accumulate. And yeah, and unfortunately that's the truth. And, you know, we do, that's why we, you know, needed to get into the dredging, and as much as we can avoid this is what we try to do. And that's why we have those stormwater regulations. So I think that was about it. Just another picture of the river here. This is down at the end at Sears Point. So you can see that low energy, high sediment environment is going to definitely create what's called a depositional environment that gets that sediment accumulation. So yeah, I guess, you know, as an end here, you know, well, we don't really want to see anything going into the storm systems, you know, potentially potable water if need be. But other than that, it's definitely do what you can to keep them clean. So, thank you guys, and I'll end there. And if you have any questions, I'm happy to take any questions.
Well, thank you so much, Nate, for that. certainly one thing that I took of the many things that I just learned. It was actually brought up in the first presentation that Serena led, from households to watershed. It was mind-blowing to me to recognize that our stormwater genuinely goes straight to our waterways. I know every time you see a grate or somewhere where the water is actually flowing, you have a sign on there. It says goes to our waterways, no dumping, or whatever the language is. It's so apparent right there. But if I'm learning anything from these presentations, it just takes a shift in perspective to really understand every single thing that we do affects something larger. And so that's coming back to our daily actions having a huge impact. So I really appreciate you bringing up the MS4 permit and all of those best management practices. And I want to emphasize that the City of Petaluma is taking really great strides to highlight and uplift conservation and our ecology and our environment. And with that glyphosate ban, as well as this recent gas station ban, we are taking great strides in being leaders in protecting our environment. And so I'm not going to tell anybody what to do and what not to do, but if you did have to use pesticides, I do just want to put a caveat in there. Try and use it in our dry season. Don't use it during a time where the rain can come and just wash everything off of your landscape and send it directly to the waterways. So I just wanted to put that out there. Be mindful of when you are applying things to your landscape, because now we know it will go straight to our waterways.
I wanted to make a quick comment too. Nate mentioned the idea of water sheeting off of your landscape, I think, which is a term that we all use in, the landscape industry, but I just wanted to make sure everybody else understood what that meant. When you have a turf grass or lawn in your landscape, that's what he's referring to, is water tends to not infiltrate through that grass as much, but it tends to move in like sheets of water over your landscape, versus if you have a more permeable surface on your landscape, such as he had an example of a nice little rain garden with rocks, or even decomposed granite is a good option. We like to use mulch at Daily Axe. We're all about the sheet mulching and the mulch lasagna. All of those things do a much better job at allowing water to infiltrate into the soil, which helps to sink it and slow it and spread it right there in that spot, rather than allowing it to run off of the lawn into our driveways and down into that stormwater drain. And of course, we have a ton of amazing resources on our website for ways that you could, include those landscape practices in your own landscape, like have rainwater catchment to catch some of that water and release it over a slower period of time, over a long time, or sheet mulching your lawn. And a lot of these things are helping more than one issue. You're helping prevent stormwater pollution, but we're also facing a really dry year this year too. So, changing your landscape from lawn into sheet mulch helps in a lot of different ways, more than just one.
Thank you for that, Serena. And I think we'll pass it back to Stephanie.
All right, I'm gonna share my screen again and hopefully hop back into my presentation here. Lay it. Okay, wow, started right where we left off. Great. So yeah, looking, just kind of taking this away from Nate, thank you, kind of ending with dredging, and want to pick that up on kind of a different level is, I think we have heard now why it's needed. We're getting all this sediment from different sources. And so it's going to build up, as Nate said, it's just going to continue to build up, especially in these, areas that we saw during the recent lack of dredging, in the turning basin, in that area where there's that slowdown, and we had the little island forming. So it's going to continue to fill in. And, that's something as a city that we need to figure out what we want to do in terms of long term. We could let that happen and to have a very different, it's going to affect the character of our town, but it's also going to, since we've made so many changes, increase in flooding. If that fills in, that water, has to go somewhere, and going down through the river right now is where we want it to stay, not coming out into the town. So I think, we all saw how long it took to get the river dredged. It was something, I think it had been dredged the last time in like 2007, I want to say. And so it had been, I think, almost 15 years since there had been a full dredging. I think the last dredging was actually just like an emergency dredging, not a full thing. So, you know, why were we in this predicament where we could not get the river dredged? You know, a lot of that has to do with how funds are appropriated for the Army Corps of Engineers who does the dredging project. Things changed around that time in terms of how money could be appropriated federally. And so what the Army Corps does now is they look at commercial tonnage going down rivers and base their priorities for what they're dredging based on that tonnage. So we have some river industry here in Petaluma, but not enough that we were competitive and able to get on that dredge list for quite a few years. And as a community, we really stepped up. And you know, there were several grassroots campaigns that started. Friends as part of, you know, a recreational group. We did some letter writing with all the other groups like, you know, North Bay Rowing Club and the Petaluma Small Craft Coalition. We all, you know, banded together to just really state our case that, you know, this is an important resource for our town. And the mayor did her mayor's dredge pledge. And we had, you know, at all levels of government and leadership advocating with the Army Corps to come down. So we had them several times come out, you know, the colonels from the Army Corps came and we took them out on our pontoon boat and not purposefully got stuck in the mud at one point. So it's kind of like, you see why we need you. So it was several years of really advocating. And the, you know, when I remember the last time we had them here, you know, people came out around the turning basin and held signs and just really showing that community support. And that is really what pushed us over the edge. So, you know, the project was just completed this last fall. And we had a ribbon cutting ceremony downtown, and I, you know, talked to some of the folks from the Army Corps, and they said that was really what made the difference, was that community support that they saw here in Petaluma. So, you know, showing that we care really means a lot. So you know, now we need to figure out the next step, because I don't know how many times they're going to dredge. But as a community, you know, we've proven that we can come together and solve this problem. So just looking at other ways that we can really help as well. So, you know, obviously we all can't be out there, you know, writing, well, we can all be writing letters, but in terms of, you know, getting the Army Corps out here, but there's other ways that we can look at the source of some of these pollution. So, you know, for silt, erosion of our sediments, you know, really looking at what's happening in our outer landscapes and how we are a part of that. I know we're not all farmers, but we all eat, we all buy food, and just, you know, looking at who we're supporting in that way. This is from an event we do called Transhumance, where we have we herd a flock of sheep through Petaluma from the outer landscape into the city center, and we take them to Steamer Landing Park and they do some grazing. But it's really just a way to like connect people to what's going on. You know, we're a very agricultural area, and so there's a lot of opportunities, but to make sure that what we're supporting are using the right practices. So, you know, there's ways to do regenerative agriculture that we are, you know, giving back to the soil health rather than just extracting. So, you know, finding out how you can support those businesses and buying local and sustainably produced food. I think we've beaten this one home, pick up after your pets. So probably need to say more there. But looking at also, you know, where we as people who maybe aren't living, well, either rural or in town, you know, looking at your septic tank, is it leaking? There are programs to help replace those. And, you know, I think here in Petaluma, you're also responsible for your sewer lateral line out to the road. So you're making sure there's no leaks in that, because that is getting into the river as well. And then, yeah, again, you know, I would just say stop using pesticides altogether, but well, you know, be diplomatic. So another thing I just want to really point about is, you know, looking at green development. We are not, you know, as advocates for the river, we're not anti-development, but really that it's done the right way. So this is a really bad picture of the Ellis Creek water facility, but just as an example of, you know, ways that we can be designing for this, you know, future that we're looking at. So we've got, you know, the living roof, you know, storm capture. I know, you know, there's the use of permeable surfaces so that water can sink through. And again, you know, we're not all in the position that we're, you know, redesigning our homes right now, but as we see development happening in Petaluma, it's really up to us to make sure that it's the right kind of development, so that, you know, we're not paving over everything. We're not creating these spaces that, you know, are hurting our landscapes, but that they are created in harmony and supporting them as well. So on the left here, this is a picture of an area of the upper river where around where some development was potentially taking place. There's been a lot of ups and downs with it, so I'm not sure right now, but you know, again, just developing in the right place with the right tools. So you know, as citizens, I think it's important that we, you know, pay attention to that, what's happening around us, because we want to make sure that in, you know, at the end of the day, we're living in a city that is, you know, moving in the right direction. We see a lot of things, you know, coming with climate change. And so it's really up to us to create, like I think Liz said, you know, be the, I'm going to butcher that, but, you know, be the change that you want to see. So, you know, I think just being aware and, you know, sometimes it's as easy as just sending an email. You know, if we see something that is a project that is not in keeping with what we want to see in our town. And I believe, and maybe Nate can correct me, but I'm pretty sure the city recently put into effect an ordinance where new construction has to have electric or only electric. And so just more things like that that we can be doing that we're requiring development to have. So, you know, recapturing that stormwater, using it in our landscapes. And I think that is, oh, last slide. And so only the trash, you know, one thing I just want to really focus on too is just the reduction. You know, I think back to like the 3 R's. We don't really talk about them anymore, but so much that we use cannot actually be recycled. And I think there's this huge myth that like, oh, if we just recycle more. But, you know, I think only 9% of plastics are recycled, either because they can't be or because they're not put in the recycling. And so we really just need to reduce our consumption, you know, find ways to reuse, stop using single-use, you know, bottles and bags. And that's always one of the main things we find, you know, in mass when we do these cleanups is, you know, single-use bags, single-use bottles, a lot of plastic. And, you know, if you are getting a single-use drink, I know sometimes we have to have something, but, you know, maybe get a can, something that can actually close the recycling, you know, circle rather than plastic, which, you know, cannot. And, you know, one thing that we do a video contest for kids in high school and middle school each year, looking at, you know, different ways that they can, you know, kind of make a PSA where they can support the river. Last year's was on microplastics and how they can stop those from getting in the river. And so as when we do all these things, I got to learn a lot. And one of the things that I was, you know, surprised by was just where microplastics are actually coming from. So I don't think there's been a study specifically on the Petaluma River, but the San Francisco Estuary Institute did a study in the Bay, and found that, you know, most of the microplastics are coming from tires and clothing. So two things that I wouldn't really have thought of, but, you know, buying new clothing and a lot of fleece, which I think is kind of ironic, but, you know, washing that in your washing machine, little tiny beads. So there's actually things now you can put in your washing machine that will catch those little beads. And then, you know, just trying to not be on the road as much. I think there's several things, ways that can impact our environment. But in so many ways, you know, just even the tire from our, you know, the plastic from our tires. So that was all I had to share, and just a huge thank you to everybody. So great to just get to come and share some of this information, and great to, you know, see folks who are wanting to do stuff to help out. I'm going to stop sharing here. And then I think we can open it up for questions.
Thank you so much, Stephanie. That was fantastic. And for anybody who might have missed the previous webinar that we hosted last week, we did have Lisa Moore from Ecology, who did an amazing job highlighting the different ways that we can actually appropriately be recycling, composting, and getting rid of our trash. So that was a really eye-opening opportunity. We'll be sure to include that in our follow-up resources. And that's right, we would love to open this up now for a little bit more of a discussion. And if folks don't have questions right this second, I'm happy to go into a few different opportunities for rebate programs. Let's get a feel of the audience. I can see you all now.
Okay, this is Keith.
All right, Keith, let's hear it.
So I came across something really early this morning on public radio that I think everybody here would be interested in, and I suspect one or more of you know more about it than I do. It concerned what sounds like a very new report from the San Francisco Estuary Institute. And it sounds like it, and I couldn't find it on their website. I just said, maybe I didn't know where to look. It deals with the intersection of dredging, spoils, wetlands, and climate change. And basically it sounds like it's looking at aspirations or maybe even plans for redirecting dredging spoils. This is not just the Petaluma River now, this is Bay Area wide, redirecting them to fortify wetlands. The idea being with climate change and ocean rise, there's a danger of losing some of our wetlands, which among other things, protect our coastal areas, like, you know, what's happening in Louisiana. And so it sounded very interesting, and unfortunately I couldn't find the report, but it's obviously a very interesting idea, and maybe somebody knows where to get a hold of that report.
I don't know about that report, but yeah, beneficial reuse of dredge spoils is becoming a big thing, and you know, it's actually pretty valuable at this point. If you look up to that historical hydrology study, you can see, and I think just the Estuary Institute has on their website, you know, all the wetlands that used to be around the Bay Area and how those have been degraded. Petaluma actually has the largest ancient tidal marsh in California. So this North Bay is in better shape than the rest of the Bay. But yeah, what they want to do is, you know, put those dredge spoils at the mouths of some of these tidal areas so that, you know, just naturally will bring that silt in to the marshes and help raise those up as we're looking at, you know, sea level rise coming. So yeah, that beneficial reuse is a pretty big thing right now.
I think
I add a little bit to Keith on what you asked for. There is a webinar that's actually coming up fairly soon. I have to look it up exactly when and where, but it's going to be by the SFEI type folks and Save the Bay. It's got about the Baylands, the Petaluma Baylands, which is down by the San Pablo Bay area, but those mudlands that are mud areas down the mud flats that are already started to form. But as sea level rises, and they've done some modeling and some, there is a study I found recently that they looked at a large set of a large piece of land, just sort of like in the middle of the marsh. And they looked at what potentially modeling the sea level rise is going to do. They think the water's going to rise faster than the sediment can keep up, and that everything's going to turn into a mud flat by 2080. And so to combat that, the recommendation is going to be to add sediment or the dredge spoils and put it on top of, if you put a thin layer on top and try to keep up with it so that the marshland can keep up with the water rise and therefore save the marshland. So it doesn't turn into mud flats, but stays as a marsh. So I think that's what's going to be talked about at that time, but that's still in the investigation, data, modeling type stage, but I'm hoping to hear more at this webinar that's coming up on the Baylands. I have to look it up exactly when and where it's going to be, but it's going to be the next month somewhere.
April
Yeah, I think it's
27th,
either-
I think.
Yeah. So get a hold of that webinar and show up on that. So that'll indicate where we're going from there. So I have for Nate, I have some questions for him on the what he might know about particularly the sediment that's coming down. I've asked this of Jonathan Sengele. Since we know that from the geology that most of the sediment from the river is actually coming from the east side hills, from the erodible surfaces there, how much of our sediment can we actually reduce, do you think, if we go after all the mostly agricultural lands, or there's lots of creeks and waterways out there that are draining into the creeks that do not have the green, the setback areas where we have the corridors. There's a lot of rangeland out there, and you see the cows, and it's just like they're bare, and a lot of erosion going on in the fields between probably around Adobe Road, both east and west of Adobe Road, back and forth. Is there a way we can work with the local ranchers and agronomists, farmers out there working to change the practices to get more vegetation on the actual riparian corridors in there? Can we do something about that?
That's a really good question. As far as the city's ability to sort of regulate outside of city limits, I'm not exactly sure, the stretch of, that we're able to accommodate that. But yeah. I mean, I'm not sure exactly what sort of BMPs, those farmers or agricultural people follow, or if they're even, sort of regulated by any sort of entity to make sure that they are doing these best management practices. I would hope that on some level that, these farmers, they don't want their grounds eroding away, I would imagine, so I'd imagine that there's some sort of personal responsibility that they would want to put out to keep their property intact the way it is. But that's a good question. I mean, it's definitely something to look into. I can bring it up with my supervisor and see, what she has to say, because, that sedimentation is a problem.
Climate's going to be right outside of city limits, the urban growth boundary. If you go up Adobe Road, there's several creeks that you see there where waterways, which are highly erodible, that are happening, that are providing lots of sediment. And we only need to reduce the amount of sediment ending up, because it's all brown. If you look at the water coming down Adobe Creek and some of the others, it's totally brown with sediment coming in whenever it rains. And so there are more ways of doing that.
I know the Sonoma Resource Conservation District has programs to work with landowners on this very thing to help, to replant along these areas and to do other erosion control. And I just heard from them that they actually have funding for more, lands in Petaluma right now. So I think, they're just connecting with landowners. So if you know any landowners who might be interested, connecting them with the RCD, they do fund that and will come out and, look at your property and do just an assessment of what's needed. And so they're a great resource there. Also Straw with Point Blue, they work with landowners and will go and, revegetate those areas to help stop erosion. So those are both some options. I don't know for Straw how they get landowners and owners in the program, but they're working all over the place. So it's a good resource as well.
And then something that Stephanie mentioned earlier about the rubber and the roads. So all that asphalt and all the tires, the wear between the friction, huge source. People don't realize how much volume of, because every worn out tire means it's worn out, means all the bits and pieces ended up in the road and all the oil. So that's huge. And so getting folks to convince to do aerodynamic cars and drive slowly and not go around corners fast, saving their tires as much as possible would be a huge program. We have to maybe change people's behavior about their driving habits. They don't have to get there at 40, 50 miles an hour across town. They go at 20, please. Actually, 20 is pretty nice to get across town. You don't have to be going 40 or 50. And then the other area we need to work on is roofs and hard surfaces and all the chemicals and stuff. You look at your roof and all the stuff that's in your gutters that comes down, and everybody's roof is spilling all this, both chemicals and physical particles down in. And there needs to be a lot better way in working with the construction folks and the design of where these drains, because they just come down to the ground. And we've known for some time, I think for like 20 or 30 years now, I know that huge amounts of chemicals come off roofs into our systems here. And they all go onto our cement, which then goes down to the driveway, which goes straight into the systems. So we need to somehow get a lot more advertising and PR and education around getting those drains to be filtered, at least to get the particles out that's coming off of them. That would then go into the trash, and also maybe to slow that water down entirely for many reasons, and the ponding. So I think the Daily Acts, you're doing a great job trying to get that publicized, but we need to do a lot better and a lot more on that area.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you so much for that, John. I couldn't have said it better myself. You're absolutely right. It's all about behavioral change, shift in perspective, and being better, educating better. There's an amazing graphic that I actually should have included in this presentation. I think it was put together by Brock Dolman with the Occidental Arts and Ecology Center. And it's a graphic that highlights an average home or a residential area. And it's indicative of our larger communities. And it says, pipe it, pave it, pollute it. And so you think of your home as a watershed, or your building as a watershed. The rain hits your roof, it goes off, it sheets off your lawn or your hardscape that you have, and it goes right into the storm drain, polluting, grabbing all of the pollutions along the way. And the shift in perspective is slow it, spread it, sink it. So Nate and Stephanie both hit on that throughout their presentations of having more permeable surfaces or slowing that water down on your landscape. I'll be sure to include those graphics in the follow-up message, but that was one thing that I learned many years ago through a permaculture design course, of just that simple shift in perspective, that we can actually keep water on our landscape. We can keep it on the landscape and out of the storm drains. So I'm really glad that you brought those points up, John. Thank you so much. And I think that actually brings me to the rebate program that the City of Petaluma has going on, and that's going to be the Mulch Madness program. Getting to our slide really quickly. Always welcome for more conversations, but the City of Petaluma has an amazing Mulch Madness program, and basically they have a rebate that will allow any City of Petaluma water customer to get all of the materials that they need to sheet mulch their yard. And if anybody is not familiar with sheet mulching is a technique in which you lay 1 inch of compost, 2 layers of cardboard, and 3 inches of mulch in order to decompose your lawn in place. Forgive me as I go through these slides and get us up to date on our presentation. But it's an absolutely amazing resource that not many other cities have to offer. And it's launched now. The city actually chose to launch it a little bit earlier than usual because we are about to enter a drought. And it's our daily actions and what we can do in our own landscape that is going to make a difference, and is going to change how people look at water conservation. And by keeping water on our site, not only are we keeping pollutants out of our storm drains, but we're recharging our aquifers, we're recharging that groundwater. And so it's really critical now more than ever to make these type of changes. Nice. Thank you so much, Serena, for dropping that in the chat. And I'll be sure to advertise that in our follow-up email. There are a few different rules in order to qualify, but if you go ahead and call the number listed above, folks will be able to come out and check, give you the check boxes and approve you for this Mulch Madness program. And once you are approved, you actually are also qualified for a 1-hour consultation through Daily Acts. And so we can talk to you about different opportunities for growing food, medicine, habitat, and creating that native, low maintenance, beautiful landscape that you may be looking for. I can't reiterate enough how phenomenal this program is. Again, that's compost, cardboard, mulch, and a free delivery. Free, if I haven't emphasized that enough. Everybody should be taking advantage of it. You must be a City of Petaluma water customer and you must be actively maintaining at least 500 square feet of lawn. Additionally, the time frame for this program is now from April to October, and this does line up perfectly with the California Regional Water Quality Board's best management practices for preventing contaminants from entering the storm drain. That goes back to something I mentioned earlier. If you do choose to apply pesticides, which I absolutely would not recommend, making sure you're doing it in the dry season. Same with Mulch Madness. We want to make sure if there was any rainstorm that we're keeping mulch out of our waterways. And again, I'll be sure to incorporate that in our follow-up email.
Okay, so Liz, on your in the Mulch Madness program, one of the concerns I have is in the sheet mulching.
Mhm.
Then actually the sheets of cardboard, and you have to make it clear that when sheet mulching, if you're using cardboard that has lots of chemicals in it, wax, maybe the cardboards come from China, which may have a bunch of chemicals in it. But all these, the cardboard itself does usually have some sort of waxy material in it, which prevents water to penetrate it. So water will sheet off of it like lawn. So you somehow either have to design the way you lay your cardboard down, or not too thick, not too many layers, because you want it to decompose and you don't want so much wax. I think what you provide in the city is the thinner cardboard that's mostly fibrous and doesn't have as much wax in it as some of the box containers that we might use instead. And also all the plastic needs to come off of that cardboard if you use boxes, because I've got a quarter acre. I'm here at the community garden, and right now I'm just pulling huge amounts of tape out of when they put the cardboard down, and there's large volumes of plastic tape I'm taking off the ground.
Yeah, that's such a great point, John, because so often we are advocating not only to sheet mulch your lawn, but to get resourceful, find cardboard boxes or go to appliance stores and get larger boxes so that you don't have to pay the larger expense. You're right that the city of Petaluma does go through grab and go, and so we're using recycled cardboard that is much thinner, and so it's going to decompose a lot faster. But you brought up such amazing points that we want to use cardboard that has little to no coloring in it, no artificial dyes, definitely no plastics. If we can get the staples out too, that's fantastic. So I really appreciate you bringing that up. And in the same vein, we really like to advocate for pretty much eliminating any sort of landscape fabric as well. I know that so many folks use that, or some people actually inherit gardens that have landscape fabric. While it may be a decent weed suppressant, it does have those microplastics in it. And when it starts to break down, it's just shreds and shreds, which ultimately, as we've learned today, will be a pollutant and could very easily just end up in our storm drains. So if we can be as resourceful and environmentally friendly as possible, that's going to be our best bet for keeping water on our landscape. So thank you so much for that, John. I really appreciate your knowledge and making everybody aware of that fact. Again, in the same vein of our Mulch Madness program, like I mentioned, once you qualify for Mulch Madness, you do have the opportunity to get a 1-hour free consultation from Daily Axe. And as of recently, we've been starting these garden office hours. So basically each month we've had different topics from Mulch Madness to garden design. And oops, sorry, the state is actually incorrect. I will update that in our follow-up email, but our next program is going to be on plant selection. And so we'll be talking about a variety of different plants that you can incorporate in your own landscape that will be low water use, habitat providing, and probably will have a multitude of different benefits that you didn't even know of. Additionally, if anybody has ever heard of the Leadership Institute, Daily X recently absorbed the Leadership Institute for Just and Resilient Communities, and we have a few different opportunities for folks to plug in and learn more about this 10-month leadership training program. Pretty much, in short, if you are looking to step up and play more of an active role in advocating for climate change and advocating for your community, this is a program for you. Again, this is a 1-hour opportunity to learn more about that program, meet alumni of it, and see how you can plug in and play a very pivotal role in our community to be a change maker. As always, we cannot do any of our programs without our special sponsors. So this is a quick shout out, but for the folks that are here today, Again, thank you for the City of Petaluma, as well as Stephanie from the Friends of the Petaluma River for partnering on this program. We could not have done this without you all, and I sincerely hope we have more opportunities to collaborate and educate our community, because this has been an incredibly valuable program. And a nice silver lining of COVID and doing everything online is that we now have these recordings in perpetuity for all of you to share with your networks and your communities. So thank you for that. If you have any questions whatsoever, here is our contact information. If you're feeling inspired by this program, most of our events are fueled by city contracts, but every so often we have the opportunity to expand our reach through donations. So if you feel compelled to donate, please do, and we can continue to spread the good word far and wide. And so with that, I think it's time to close, and thank you all so much for being here. Again, please share this opportunity with anybody that you know who might need that friendly reminder to pick up your pet waste, or to be aware that everything you put down the storm drain ends up in our waterways. So with that, if there are any lingering questions, now would be the time. May 6th. Thank you, Serena, for making that correction on the plant selection garden conversation.
Okay, we have the Eco Garden Tour is coming up real soon. So I think that's coming up. I think it's sort of recorded all virtual now for our county. And then there's a really nice one. The Alameda County puts on a world-class tours virtually again, but it's over 4 weekends. It's Saturday or Sunday mornings coming up. And that's also a really good shows to go see for how to re-landscape and do things using native plants and pollination plants going on. So lots happening out there right now.
Nice, excellent plug, John. Yeah, May 15th, I think, is when the Sonoma County one will go live. I'll send that in the follow-up email. Amazing network of gardens and full of tons of inspiration to see what people can do in their own landscapes. Thank you for that.
Since we're just plugging dates here, I will say that our next river cleanup is May 1st. So if you want to come out, you can sign up. You have to sign up in advance, but we are still following COVID rules and get people out in small groups in creeks to help clean up. So needing a lot of volunteers for that. Just friendsofthepetalumariver.org. Thanks.
Send us the link for that, and we'll include that in the follow-up.
Okay, yeah, I will.
Get out in the field and see each other and clean the river. It sounds great.
And I'm hoping to see you guys over in Earth Day and that Thursday, Friday, Saturday. I think, I'm not sure if Liz is free. I think I sent you a notice on that recently.
Yeah.
But I think I've seen you all out there before, and we'll go out there again. And on those dates, I think, Stephanie, you're setting that up for us.
Yeah, so that'll be the 22nd, 23rd, 24th, and those will, it'll be the same link to sign up. So I'll send that over to everybody, or I'll send it to Serena. Serena can send it to everybody.
Perfect.
Yeah, Stephanie and John, thank you so much for spearheading those cleanups. The one time I was able to make it out, it was shocking how much debris and pollution was at Shollenberger, because that was the spillway for the dredging. And it was all at the same time, it was so inspiring how the community came together to clean up our area, our community, our habitat, a place that we all cherish and love. So there is so much strength and power in community. And so again, thank you to both of you and the community that you have created for this river cleanup. I really appreciate it. All right. Are there any last words? Thank you, Hal. I appreciate that. Thank you all so much. I hope that we are able to connect sometime soon. If anything comes up, any questions or any ideas for possible collaborations, please do not hesitate to reach out. I'm very excited for what the next few months will bring, and ideally we will all be able to connect sometime very soon, possibly even in person. And until then, I hope we are able to connect via email and virtually.
Thanks everyone for attending. Have a great rest of your afternoon.
Yeah, thank you so much. Stephanie and Nate, thank you for absolutely everything. Like I mentioned yesterday, once we click leave, this will be an abrupt goodbye, but thank you for all of your time, your effort, and your knowledge that you have shared today. I know we'll be in touch.
Cool. Look forward to seeing you guys soon.
Absolutely, Nate. Thank you, Stephanie. Take care.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.